Sri Lanka's administrative service, where does it stand today? And what more can we do in Sri Lanka to help the administrative service, the civil service, help develop the country and contribute meaningfully to the development aspirations of our nation? I've invited to our studios a veteran Sri Lankan administrative serviceman, an individual who has been with governments, with the administrative service for over 5 decades. And this veteran civil servant, of course, began his career during the then Ceylon Administrative Service back in 1963. Before I introduce 1967, Mr. Austin Fernando, a very warm welcome to you at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
As I mentioned, there is over 5 decades of administrative service contributions to the Sri Lankan economy, to the service. You started back in 1967 when it was the Ceylon Administrative Service. And since then, you've worked with 6 executive presidents, of course, starting with President J.R. Jayawardena, and then with President Rana Singha Premadasa, then with President D.B. Wijetunga, then with President Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga, followed by President Mahinda Rajapaksa, and also with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Of course, with the incumbent President Ranil Wickremesinghe, you've worked with him, you've done politics and with him, and you have also been a civil servant and a public administrative service personnel during a key period of our history, during the ceasefire agreement, when now President Ranil Wickremesinghe was the Prime Minister at the time, and you were the civilian public officer, the most important public officer managing matters related to the ceasefire agreement. Tell us about your journey. I'd like to start off there.
Yeah, it's shall I say it has been fluctuating up and down, you know, going up and down. That's a interesting thing. I think life is like that also. Before I got into SLAs, CAS at that time, it was not SLAs at that time, before 72. I entered the CAS. At that time, I was, before that, I was a teacher. And I still remember when I went to teach at Nagoda Mahavidyalaya, there was one child in the GC O-level who was older to me. She was older to me by about 2 months or so. So all the children in the advanced level class were older to me.
That was in 1963. You joined as a teacher.
Straight from the university. At that time, it's a very interesting thing. Now, if you want to get a teaching appointment, people have to go on the streets shouting, "Give us a job, give us a job." But in our case, I made the application when I was a university student. I had not finished my final exam. They sent an application and said, "If you would like to become a teacher, make this application." And that went up. And suddenly, I can remember my last examination paper was geography, and that was about the 10th of April or so. And we came home for the New Year. 25th of April or so, I received a letter asking me to come for an interview in Galle Education Office to be selected as a teacher. And no politicians, no higher officials influencing you. Just get a job and go and teach. And the questions asked were your name, address, what were the subjects, where do you want to serve, district, that have been given in the application also. Is this school okay? Yes, it's okay. So that's the type of selection. Nowadays, children have to. So therefore, my entry to the public service was as a teacher, then SLAs, the real CAs. Then I had to go and work in, I was sent to Batticaloa for training. The first time I stepped into Batticaloa. I had never been to Batticaloa earlier.
That was your first appointment?
Yeah, first appointment, 67 October. First I was recruited. 1st of November I was in Batticaloa. And there I didn't know a word of Tamil. And the people also didn't know a word of Sinhala, most of the officials, I should say. There was a single Grama Sevak in Batticaloa district who was a Sinhalese man, and all were Tamils and a few Muslims. So likewise, you get used to working in a totally different environment. And there was no terrorism also at the time.
What was the sentiment like?
Sorry?
What was the sentiment there when you traveled there from the south?
Yeah, it's very interesting because there were Sinhala Mudalalis. I think the biggest jewelry shop was owned by a man called Siripala Mudalali. And many Tamils were going to buy things. So there was one Vedarani Machari or something like that owned by Tamils, but that was for elites, like, you know. So then the marketplace, there were, and even Eravur, in Valachane, you found a lot of Sinhalese people doing business, garages, bakeries, and then furniture shops, all owned by Sinhalese people at that time. So there was no problem about ethnicity and religious or whatever. We were behaving as any other person from Bettikalo district, and there was nothing to deter your actions and all that.
But what was it like for you to witness the transformation of Sri Lankan society from a peaceful environment that you saw during your first appointment, a young graduate who was given his first teacher's appointment and traveling to Batticaloa, and then over the years you see insurgencies, violence, and then terrorism, a war?
My feeling is there had been misgivings on the part of governments, all the governments, right? Not one single government. And then we here in Colombo, people have been working in such a way. They would have changed laws. Now, for example, the Sinhala only law, which are brought in. Definitely, if you were a Tamil, you wouldn't accept that as a thing. If your language is not given, because language is one thing which gives you identity. Now, if you see very recently there was this Global Tamil Forum head, the spokesperson Surendran coming and working with some Buddhist priests and civil society people, meeting the president and Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa and all these people, and then their main concern is give us equality, give us our dignity. That's the type of thing which we have. Someone may ask, what is the inequality you are undergoing? But only thing is, when you go to a police station in the north, and a Sinhala policeman is asking you to give a statement in Sinhala, if you are a Tamil, would you like it? And if you go to a police station here, and if someone asks you for to give a statement to the police in Tamil, would you like it? So these are the things which were created by the politicians because of various reasons, and then that is there. Then the economic reasons. So all those things, the cumulative had been, people were demanding. First, they demanded language. Then they start demanding land, education, jobs, development projects, freedom to do this, that, and all that. So therefore, from 1967, when I went into Bettikalo, I have come a long way and found all these bad things happening, and mostly, I don't say it's only the politicians. Politicians had been instrumental. Media had been sometimes instrumental when you look at it. Sometimes religious leaders had been instrumental. So therefore, all those things had changed the environment, which I saw in 1967, the brotherly feeling we had in.
So the turning point, do you say it's the Sinhala Only Act, or were there other contributing factors that made one community feel neglected, marginalized, against the rest of the country?
I think even as administrators, sometimes we may have done mistakes. You know, we would have been pushed into certain situations where we had to be a bit, sometimes against your conscience also. Sometimes it would have happened. It is not only the Sinhala only law, the Sinhala only situation, then the 1983 Black July. After that, only lot of politicians started, Tamil politicians started asking for things. Now, for example, would you believe if I tell you that 1985 or so, I think 85, there was a proposal made by Mr. Amrithalingam and Mr. Sivasidambaram. And they said, when you give land, giving Mahaveli land, you give so many to Tamils, so many to Muslims. Why do people ask for that? because they got the impression that we are colonizing certain areas with Sinhalese people. I personally feel the policymakers should have thought of these issues. And then, of course, I don't think that it is the same thing in the minds of other people. When I was GA in Aurelia, I remember there were applications called to be settling people in Mahavali area. I told the Tamil politicians from the estate sector, why don't you send your applications? We will get some people land in that area, all irrigated land. And then 3 acres of, I think, 2.5 acres and 3 acres, half acre for housing or something like that. I can't remember the exact extents. When I said that, they never took any interest. The reason for that is the Tamil politicians, the state sector politicians, they thought if these people go to Kalabava area, we will lose the numbers in this one. In no area. Therefore, our representation will be attacked, and our superiority with the people over here, and superiority even with the Sinhala politicians here, they are negotiating situation. And they
but is there a basis for the concerns that there were efforts by the politicians or the administrative service, the structure to colonize certain areas by...
No, I don't think colonization is a national policy. But then if you take the national policy business about land, you know, the only place where in the law, of Sri Lankan law to my knowledge, where national policy should be done in some specific way according to the constitution, that is only about land. In Annex 2 of the 13th Amendment, they say that a National Land Commission has to, and then there should be these experts in that case, there should be a secretariat for land, then they must make the policy, and that policy should be adhered even by the provincial councils. Everything is there. It had been there in the law from 1978 onwards today. We have never heard of the National Land Commission which have been appointed. How many years? So many years people, so who is responsible to appoint? The government. So therefore government is politicians once again. And then people who should have pushed this, people like us who are in the public service. I was never in the lands ministry, but that is those are the people. So therefore if you say politicians and bureaucrats have caused some of these damages, yes, they have.
And you have been with the 6 executive presidents.
Yeah.
Worked with them, been in the public service, overseeing some of the decisions they've taken, being part of some of the decisions. I'd like to continue to talk about the ceasefire agreement. But before that, Mr. Fernando, do you think much could have been done to alleviate the discomfort or the concerns of the Tamil community of the country? And at the same time, the Sinhalese in the present day, they feel threatened as a majority community, that there is advancements made by the minority. However, there is tension between the communities.
The only thing is that when in 1967, when I got into service, there was no tension of that nature. 1972, 73, it was not there. But 1983, Black July was a turning point. I think that the Black July was one place where they felt that, or in the meantime, there were certain things like the education policy changes, then land policy changes. Some of those things were irking the Tamil community and the Muslim community also sometimes. But the situation got really bad after the 1983, where people started running away from the country. So many, the migration to India was the highest, and to the Western countries. People who went to the Western countries had connections there, roots there, and some were well-to-do people. Poor people went to India. So there was the problem of the refugees. Then what happened was, those refugees who went there to the other countries, they started gathering together, and then various groups were formed. And in some countries, if you go to Ontario in Canada, you'll find a big big lot of organizations as well as strong people over there, and even in England or Paris, everywhere you find them, because they also got together and they started canvassing those governments. So therefore, because of that, when they started things happening here, to the well-being of the Tamil people, then the Sinhalese people also feel, okay, we are not getting it. So likewise, this had been a competitive situation where the ethnicities start doing this. But only thing is, you can't blame only the politician, only the public officers. No, many things. The politicians, of course, yes. Then the public servants also sometimes had been carried along with the politicians. Then we had the media. Then we had some of these organized associations, all that ethnic or religious-based organizations. Whether they wanted to have integration is a question.
I'd like to go back to your time with the presidency before we go to the ceasefire agreement. You worked with President Jayawardena at the time. He's known as one of the strongest leaders. With the Constitution and the statements he made. What was it like working with him?
No, about the Constitution, well, at that time I didn't get a hang of it so much. So I was junior and I was not interested. But later, some of the constitutional changes which he made in the executive presidency and all that, I think has caused certain difficulties, and they are continuing to be there, and that is there, I think. But of course, working with him as an administrator, I was not working like as a constitutional expert or a lawyer or something like that. I had been working with him as a public officer. I think I must say, he had, I think because of his maturity and the experience he has had, he had some positive actions with the public officers. He may have erred here and there, I don't deny that, but my personal experience is, it is not so. I remember once he wanted me to do something to benefit one of his people who had come and met me, and I told him, the person who wanted the help, I was not prepared to help him, and I knew that he was a good friend of President Jayawardena, but I said no. Then one day I got a call from President Jayawardena direct and asking me to do that. Then I said, no, sir, I can't do that because of this. And he went on arguing with me for about 10 minutes on the phone. Finally, he just gave it up. Probably he asked me, can you get an appointment fixed up for this gentleman to go and meet so and so, so and so. I said, yes, that I will do, and I did.
So there was no transfer, a transfer or any other kind of intimidation?
No, really there wasn't. And after 1 year or 1.5 years or so, he appointed me as Secretary Rehabilitation. That's the difference.
So to have that kind of that personality, was it allowed within the service? Because now I'm not saying that all public service or those in the civil service are corrupt or don't stand up for what's right or wrong. There are many who lead an exemplary service life. But at the time, for you to say, no, I will not do this, this is why I won't, were you heard? Is that why you were able to talk, or was that the norm at the time?
I think most likely I would have, shall I say, miscalculated the powers of a president. So I was very truthfully telling him what the law and what it is. He knows the law, but better than I did. But then he could tolerate. I have another example, interesting story which I heard from Mr. Manikdewala one day, his secretary. There had been a dignitary from a foreign country, a top-class dignitary who wanted something to be done to assist one of his people who was living in this country. Jayawardena. And he wanted a letter, and there was a man called M.A.J. Vanigaratna. I could remember his name, but I don't know the guy. He was the, I think, Director General of Immigration or so. He sent a letter he got a letter from the foreign dignitary, and he gave that letter, and he sent a letter asking how about this case. It is in this book also, which I written, Austin. And then the report came negative to the intention of the president. Then he was asked to come, and he was asked, why are you not recommending this? He said, sir, this man asked me for this one in writing. I said no. Then he asked the same thing from you, and you as the minister didn't give it because you then. From that day onwards today, I have no reason to give him because he has not improved. He has nothing, no positive mark to give him. So therefore, I won't recommend. Then he said, can't I give it? He said, yes, you can give it. But if you give it, there will be so many other people asking for the same concession. Then he asked Mr. Vanigaratna to go out of the room, and after a little while, Mr. Vanigdevla came with the file and asked Mr. Vanigaratna, Vanige, they were batchmates or so, they are friends. Vanige, you know what the boss said? He said, I don't know. He showed his thing. He also had regret. That means he going along with the recommendation of the head of department. And then he said, do you know what he told me? He said, if we have 10 Vanigaratnas, I can run this country. So that's the type of treatment he gave. He may have, people are criticizing him for various things, but I'm appreciating him as a public officer. So therefore, these are good lesson for others also. If we can, if the present president or the future president or the presidents who were there, if they could have done the same thing, I think we would have had a better public service and a better political administration.
From there on, you served under President Ranasinghe Premadasa, President D.B. Wijayatunga, and then with President Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga. I'm sure you've had many interesting incidents during this time, but you're sacked later on by Madam CBK.
No, I have been, I don't know whether sacked or whatever it is. I was put to the pool by President Kumaratunga. I think, of course, she didn't give me a chance to explain myself. She didn't give that. I think it shouldn't have happened in that manner, because a secretary, when he's pushed out to the pool, they call it the pool, you know, that's the Siberia of public service. It would have been better if I had been asked to explain my situation, which didn't happen. Anyway,
what was your relationship with her?
With her now?
With her at the time?
At that time, I was not very closely known to her, but you know, when you become a head of state, people come and tell you. I think it's not the fault of the head of state. It's not the head of the fault. And people come and tell you, politicians, businessmen, and friends and relations. Various people come and try to interact with you about others. So this happens.
You were Secretary Defense at the time, I must remind our viewers, and you were the civilian public officer managing the ceasefire agreement. Tell us what this experience was like. Where did the discussion about a ceasefire agreement come to the administrative service or public office?
What happened was, I think, the Prime Minister, and we had it's a little bit of conflicting situation. The President was Chandrika Bandaranaike and Ranil Wickremesinghe was the Prime Minister. Two different parties. And they have contested elections, and this gentleman has won the election in the parliament. So quite naturally, there can be common thinking, common approaches. That can not happen not only in Sri Lanka, and even in another country, it will be the same thing. So what happened was, we have forgotten that. I think if it is on 5th of January 1995, if I remember right, President Kumaratunga, no, 1995, yes, 1995. She was there. Yes, 1995. She had an agreement with. There was a understanding, memorandum of understanding signed between President Kumaratunga and Prabhakaran. I think it was done. I have not seen any document where her signature is, but I have seen a letter that had been published by the President's office, media. She was for peace. I think one must not run down people. Like, I mean, she was for peace. She wanted to have peace.
President
President
Chandra
Chandra
Naika
Kumar, yes, she
Kumaratunga wanted peace.
wanted peace. She genuinely wanted peace. And she came to some sort of agreement. And there's a document that had been published by the Presidential Secretariat. In that, she was agreeable to various concessions to be given to these people. She was agreeable. I think that's a great thing, because when you have a war which is between your own kith and kin, and your army is being sent to kill your own citizens, I think she would have felt bad. She might have, I don't know. Anyway, with that background, when Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe became the Prime Minister, he also would have thought, you can carry on with this. And at the same time, there were so many things that happened. The Twin Tower attack. Then because of that, the Americans, how they were influencing the rest of the world about anti-terrorist activities. Then our economic downturn at that time, not as bad as now, but it was some sort of a downturn. Yeah. Then the attack which was on the Katunayake airport attack, things like that. I think at the same time for the LTT, they were hunted down. They knew that their situation in the foreign countries and even here will not be that easy. So they also would like to have a little bit of lull in the approach to their war making. In war making you attack, but then you step back and
strategically step back. And internationally at the time
internationally there was so much of things. So LTT would have liked to. So it matched very well for Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe. He was in a bad shape here in the economy and things like that. On the other hand, the others were. So in the meantime, the intermediaries came in. That is the Norwegians came in, and Norwegians were working with Mrs. Kumaratunga also earlier. So therefore, it's a matter of generally shifting from one place to other place with the same people around. So I think most likely, I don't know why, but most likely Prime Minister Wickremesinghe would have thought that why not carry on? And then a lot of work had been done by Mr. Lakshman Kadragama before that, so that things were generally moving towards that end. So therefore I think his going for peace, the ceasefire agreement, is a correct step towards this one. But I found, you asked me how I felt about it, I was the civilian conduit, shall I say, that had to be working with the politicians and with the military. On the other hand, the military had been trained, and they were the people who were getting hit everywhere. Their soldiers had been killed and their camps had been attacked, and like that they were the people who suffered in this. So therefore, you can't change the mindset of people just because you have a ceasefire. Mindsets don't change, for the attitudes don't change towards peace that easily with the military. No military will be changing their minds. So therefore, they were. I know some of the military. Leading military officials I knew, and they were working with me. When I tell them, look here now, we have to do it, this is the problem. They used to tell me, some of them very, very senior people, they used to say, sir, there's no chance for that. You have to hit them. There were people who were thinking in those terms. And there were politicians who were
What did you feel at the time? Was it the most patriotic thing to do at the time?
I personally feel, as a public servant, I am expected to carry on, as a secretary, I am expected to carry on the policy of the government. And sometimes the policy, I may differ in my own thinking about the policy, but if you want to if you want to do that job, you have to carry on. Otherwise, you chuck up and go home. That's a different story. So what happened was, when I was working with them, I found that the LTT was not that accommodative of the peace process. They were trying to score a point, score a brownie point with everything. When the agreement, for example, was that, for example, I'll take one example. There was a section in that where we have to go out of all the public officers which are held by the military and the LTT. And then they were pressing so hard, and there were times given, time slots, 60 days, within 60 days you had to do it, within 45 days or whatever, you had to do it. And they were insisting, but when it's not easy to take an army camp from one place to another. And they know about it. But still, for all, they were asking for the pound of flesh, and that's not the way. I think they didn't show that they were going through a peace process to become friends. They were doing it in such a way that it was for. We are still not in disagreement. We want our pound of flesh like that. And then they were breaking rules, regulations also. Now in the agreement there's something to say that we can't move around, but they were moving around. And then the Navy went and attacked those ships and killed people and all that. That happened. And this was done not only by the cadres, even leadership of the LTT was doing that. I remember when one day when I was secretary, Karuna Amman, he came and asked me. We had an agreement, engagement, rules of engagement. That was to say that if they want to go from one place to another place by sea, they had to inform me for 48 hours earlier through the Sri Lanka monitoring mission. Right. So one day, Tonfur Hade came and told me that Karuna Amman wanted to go from one place to another place. Then I said, yes, he can go after 48 hours, he can go. That's a rule of engagement that had been agreed upon between Prabhakaran and us. And then he said, no, he wants to go today. I said, no, it's 24 hours. So it's not 48. Because when you say 48 hours, there's a reason for that. Because when it's 48 hours, we used to tell the Navy, you come and cover the area so that nothing happens in between which is detrimental to the peace process or to the government state. So he said no. And then I thought that he is not going to come, he will wait for 48 hours. And in the middle of the night, I get a telephone call saying that they have caught and they were going to kill. And then the Navy could have just killed him in the middle of the sea. Then they asked me. I said, no, don't. And he said, while you are sleeping, you get a call and you have to give an answer. I said, no, you can't. You should not. Then they said, no, they are violating the ceasefire agreement. I said, yes. They are violating but I said, still you don't. They are violating the rules of engagement. I said, yes, but you can't. Then he said, we can't. That's only 2 questions were asked. I said, no, and I left the telephone and kept quiet. I said, no attack. The reason was that Navy officer is doing the right thing. That is, rules of engagement broken, the ceasefire agreement, so you attack. But then if you attack Karuna Amman, who was considered number 2 at that time, there wouldn't have been a ceasefire agreement thereafter. There would have been so many bombs. They were not only attacking places in the north and east, they would have done it in other places. So I had to be thinking in terms of the big picture.
So you were basically implementing the ceasefire agreement, making decisions on.
Correct. But of course, it's a very risky thing because.
But that's a tough call, also. I mean,
that's why.
What you do with Karuna Amman.
I was a very healthy man, but by the time I finished my term as Secretary of Defense, I was having pressure and sugar and all those things.
We could imagine what life would have been at the time. Some of the darkest times of our history, and then a ceasefire agreement is reached. Well, did you believe that will genuinely work?
Yeah, at the outset, I thought even with the weaknesses in the document, which personally speaking, and while talking to our military people, they were having their own problems with this. I thought still, even with that, this is something which was required. I thought it will come through, but after about 6-7 months of the thing, I knew that it was very difficult.
So what happened to Karuna Amman thereon when you said
no? Then he went off, and then what happened was this fellow didn't kill him, fortunately. Of course, if I were in the Navy, I would have thought, well, killing is the answer. But as secretary, it's a little different ball game. Then he went off, but then we reported this matter to SLM, and SLM had a very strongly worded statement made saying that it shouldn't have happened and all that, but that's the way how things happen. You don't send a man to prison for violating that type of thing, because there was no provision in law as well as in the agreement. It's a matter of you are trying to come into agreements for the goodness of for the sake of the country. But then I don't think they were having that type of feeling. Although I had that type of feeling, or Mr. Wickremesinghe would have had that type of feeling.
I think it's time we take a short commercial break here at Hyde Park, but we'll speak more. We're in conversation with Mr. Austin Fernando, the author of 2 books. One, Mama Austin, and the second, My Belly is White. We'll return to speak more. Welcome back. We're in conversation with Mr. Austin Fernando, veteran public servant and civil servant in Sri Lanka. Mr. Fernando, you, again, during your time in the public service, you've worked with several administrations, different governments. You've also worked in the private sector between the period from 1996 to 2001. And that's afterwards that you became Secretary Defense of the CBK-RW government.
Yeah.
Thereon, you've also worked with a combination of President Maithripala Sirisena and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe.
Yeah.
This has given a reason for many questions. At times, there has been criticism over the way in which the 2 parties work together. The Easter Sunday attacks, for example, controversy surrounding the relationship between the head of state and the Prime Minister, the head of the Parliament, the government. What is your experience of President Maithripala Sirisena and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe working together?
Since you mentioned about the previous engagement with Mr. Wickremesinghe and his Chandrika Kumaratunga, the difference was there Mrs. Kumaratunga and Mr. Wickremesinghe, they fought the election against each other and then became the Prime Minister and President. But with Mr. Maithripala Sirisena and Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, they fought together. They fought together against Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa's establishment. So therefore you can't compare these two in the same light. With Mr. Maithripala Sirisena and Mr. Wickremesinghe, at the very outset there was nothing to create any problem. But I think my personal belief is that the central bank scam, I think that created a bit of problem, not bit, I think serious problem between the two, because there was some belief in Mr. Sirisena that it should be looked at, and he appointed Chitrasiri Commission also because of that. Then there were this mismatch, I should say, has several reasons for that. One is they were from 2 political parties who had been fighting each other for long time, number 1. Number 2, the understanding we had was that Mr. Sirisena is going to be president for one term. And then that means Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe will carry on as Prime Minister, and then he will contest and he will become the President later, with the support of Mr. Sirisena also, because they had been working together. But then when Mr. Sirisena accepted the SLFP leadership, probably that may have urged the UNP on this matter, number 2. Number 3, as individuals, I have been working with both of them very closely. Mr. Sirisena and I are known to each other from 1975 when I was additional GA. He was there in Polonnaruwa. Then with Mr. Wickramasinghe, after I was removed from office by Mrs. Kumaratunga in 1996, I started working with him. I was never a party member of the UNP. Of course, if you ask me about politics, I was a LSSP party member when I was a young boy, you know. So then, of course, I was working with Mr. Wickramasinghe. I have been doing politics with him, you know, because I was not a public servant. I was a complete outsider working in the private sector and working with him. Of course, not addressing meetings or something, but then you have so many things which people can do in politics. He knows about it and I know about it. So then I went on like that. Then the two gentlemen themselves were not the one is from Colombo 7 and Royal College and lawyer and speaking excellent English and all that. The other gentleman from a colony and, you know, colonist son and Gram Sevaka and then party cadre who have come from the very beginning, you know. So and socially also they were different, you know. I know both of them, their behavioral patterns I know. So therefore, this type of a clashing situation is not a surprise to anybody who knew both of them. So when you ask me this question.
But how could such experienced politicians let their personal differences affect the way they govern the country or rule the country or take decisions pertaining to the country?
Yeah, but power is something which you can't gauge that easily. Political power, when you become a president, you are the king, you know. There are no two words about you are the king, and no, they think that that they are kings also, you know.
So that's what the executive is about.
Executive is about.
Do you believe the executive must be abolished?
I believe that it should be abolished because he is not answerable to the people. He is elected by the people, but not answerable, not accountable to people. He has his own way of doing things, and all the presidents had been doing this. You know, I don't think a single president would. In fact, once in a Sinhalese newspaper, when I was interviewed, I said, the moment you become a president, you become a sarvaksha, like that.
So this is, we go back to the doings of President Riyadh here.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have any experiences in intervening in these political matters or politicians or the executive?
Yes. I have been intervening with almost all these politicians, and sometimes I had been the bad man. Sometimes I have been successful, sometimes I had failed. I'll tell you one good example of success. When the local body elections were won by the Pohottuwa and SLFP, Pohottuwa group, 42% or so, and Mr. Sirisena also got about 12% or 10% or so. People, the Pohottuwa people thought that we can be the prime minister and all that. There were some people who were working on it, and this was going on. And one fine day, I got a call from Jayadev Uyangoda, my good friend, professor, and from Jayantha Dhanapal also. On this a little while later, and they were thinking that this move to remove Mr. Wickramasinghe is on, and then. And they were saying it's against the constitution, and this will create a lot of problems. And they were apolitical people. Both of them were not politicians. So I studied the constitution myself, although I'm not a lawyer. I could understand very well. I thought they were right. Then I spoke to Mr. Jayantha Jayasuriya, who was the Attorney General, now the Chief Justice, and I told him that he is there. I said I had decided to go and tell the president that he should not do it. And this is political decision making. I am not a politician, I am an administrator. Then I said, will you join me and explain this to the president, the legal part of it, because it's better to an Attorney General doing it. And two of us went and told the president. I got an appointment fixed up, two of us went and we told him that please don't do that. You know, if you do this, this will be the problem. And Mr. Jayasuriya showed the sections of the constitution and said that. He said, yes, I understand. And they asked us to go away, you know, that's all. And then while we were coming out, I saw the people who are demanding that Mr. Wickramasinghe should be got rid of. were entering the room. And one of them spoke to me and said, Lekam Tuma, and how are you, and all that. I just smiled and went off. So, and about half an hour or 45 minutes later, I heard that he has told them that he is not going to do that because it's against, and the secretary and the attorney general have come and told him. This is a good lesson for the secretary, future secretaries also, even with the minister, and attorney generals also, that they should tell the true situation and explain to them. Of course, you are risking your job, you are risking your friendship with the person, understanding with the head of state who is the king. But then we took that step, and he was saved. For that time being, he was saved. So that's a success. There are failures also. Failures, I'll tell you one more failure, because you are talking about Mr. Wickramasinghe and Sirisena. After that, after this, there was a move to check with President. The President can ask the Chief Justice for a opinion on this type of thing. There was a move for that. Then we went and told him that also, when it was brought to us, we studied it, and we went and it was Attorney General who went and told him, and he agreed on that. The failure, that was success. Failure, I will tell you, once during this particular period, he wanted to prorogue the parliament. Mrs. Rizena wanted to prorogue the parliament, and they asked me to prepare. I told him, sir, have you spoken to the Prime Minister? Have you spoken to the Speaker? He said, no, I didn't speak to them. I said, no, it's an alliance, so therefore, isn't it? He said, no, you prepare the papers. Now that's the end of the story. I can't do anything. I prepare the papers. I took it to him, and then I took it to him, and before signing this, I said, sir, still I say that you should not sign this. He said, no, he took a pen and paras, he signed. And then the parliament stands prorogued. And then I came back. And then after about half an hour, I get a telephone call from the president. He told me, have you printed this? I said, I have been given the government printer. Have they printed? I said, no, they take about 2-3 hours to do that. Then he said, this Prime Minister and Speaker came. I told them, they have gone for some other matter. And he had told them that I had done it. They say that we should not do it for this reason, that reason, giving reasons. And he said, can you stop it? I said, yes. I went to the government printer and got it, withdrew all the papers and came back, and the program. There is a failure of the bureaucracy has failed, but the politicians, by negotiation, by consultation, they have won. So therefore, that gives the key. The key is the public servants should do that to the extent they could possibly do, and the politicians should be in a position to discuss matters, and by consultation, they must settle their own problems.
And uphold the law of the land.
That they should.
Mr. Fernando, we don't have much time on the show, but there is much to discuss with you. I know you worked with the two brothers, President Mahinda Rajapaksa and President Gotabaya Rajapaksa as well, although you were not in the administrative service during MR's period as president. Later, you were High Commissioner to India, a diplomat representing Sri Lanka. But this is also the period after which President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had to face something that no other president that you've worked with, that none of the executive presidents faced. He had to leave office earlier than expected. The Aragale, the struggle, the protests, the mass public dissent against the president, the regime began. But as a civil servant, how did you see the handling of this situation?
I personally feel that Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, although there are allegations by the UNHRC and various political parties and all that, Tamil political parties and all that, there would have been certain misgivings also, but he did the coordination of the war effort excellently. We must give him the credit for doing that. But when he became the president, I can only comment about I left public service working with him after about 40 days or something. I think very little, very little of service with him. But I have seen how things happened to him and how the Aragale and rest of it came about, because I was as an observer. But I think he had his own people who were. Every president has his own people, and he also had his own people. I don't think those people gave him the correct advice. And the other thing is, other presidents, all the presidents, even Mrs. Chandrika Kumaratunga, although she had not been she was a chief minister, prime minister, and very quick succession. She also had political background and all that. And the others, all the presidents who were there had been Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa, Mr. Sirisena, Mr. Premadasa, Mr. Jayawardena. All these people had long experience in politics, and that was not there. I think that was one more reason. And the other thing is, I have read a small document in the Indian system where Mr. Venkateswaran, who was the president, who was the secretary to the External Affairs Ministry, he was interviewed by a person when he had to leave the public service in India, and he compared. He said about Mr. Rajiv Gandhi. He says he came from a great political family, and he was a successful professional. Then he became the prime minister. And he was not listening to some of these people whose advice could have been so well. He was depending on RAW very much, the research and analysis wing of the secret police of India. So he was, and then he went to the extent of checking on statements made on his visits abroad and all that. He went to that extent. So when I read that, I was wondering whether this applies even to Mr. Rajapaksa. Rajapaksa comes from a great family. He was a successful professional. Then he also didn't listen to some of the people whom he should have listened. Then he listened to the intelligence people like Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, and of course he had to go out because of all these reasons put together. I think that is what. And Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, of course, he took some wrong decisions sometimes, and then he also had to pay with his life. And so therefore, it's just because you come from a political family, because you are a professional, because you get a massive, even Rajiv Gandhi got a massive victory. With all that, it doesn't mean that your success will be there, because other reasons matter in becoming head of state.
I'm told that's all the time we have on the show. An exemplary civil servant who even rejected offers of gifts of land by certain politicians during your time. We thank you for your service, Mr. Fernando, and we also thank you for joining us here at Hyde Park, for sharing with us your expertise, and I certainly look forward to reading your second book as well. And we wish you all the very best in sharing your views, your perspectives with the generations to come.
Thank you very much. And with all everything what I said, I don't carry any hatred or jealousy. I have more or less got out of that type of a situation. So therefore, all what I said is not with any malice to anybody, not with any hatred. And then these are experiences which people should hear also.
Certainly, it's very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We were talking to Mr. Austin Fernando, a veteran civil servant who joined the Sri Lanka Administrative Service back in 1967, has been a diplomat, a teacher, and worked with 6 executive presidents, has influenced Sri Lanka's public service in immeasurable manner, and a key implementer of the ceasefire agreement between the Sri Lankan government and the LTTE at the time. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week at the same time at Hyde Park. Good night.